Welcome to the first part of Access 2019. In this chapter here, or module here, we're going to be looking at the introduction of Access, and we're going to start building a database for a company called CMF Vets. And as we go along, we'll be building on that database. So in this case, we're just going to start. We're going to learn how to create the database. We're going to create some tables, forms, reports, and query, ask it a little bit of a question. So that's our goal today. So a little introduction to the company. In this project, we're going to look at CMF Vets, and they're a veterinary practice that takes care of all the cats and dogs' pet needs. So up until now, the appointment system has been paper-based. The staff records appointments in a large book with each page containing a specific date and time. Each page has slots for appointments, which are made in pencil and allow for changes. CMF Vets wants to computerize the appointment system with an Access database. The practice owns multiple veterinary clinics in the Southwest. The practice wants to make the appointment system easier to use and more efficient. To accomplish that goal, the practice needs better record keeping. So CMF Vets needs to record all information about the pet owners. Name and full mailing address are essential pieces of information. In addition, the practice must be able to contact pet owners quickly. The staff need to record home phone numbers and mobile phone numbers and email addresses for appointment reminders, test results, and emergency calls. Patient information is always paramount. The patient's breed, animal type, name, and owner should always be recorded so that the information can be easily retrieved. The database should also contain each patient's appointment with specific date, time, and procedure. For example, the staffing requirements of a surgical procedure will differ from those of a checkup. Each treatment has a specific cost, which needs to be recorded and applied as patients undergo these treatments. The database system must also track the veterinarians who provide those treatments. By recording all of its practice information, CMF Vets keeps its data current and accurate and can analyze it for trends. Using a database also allows CMF Vets to create a variety of useful reports, for example, tracking the frequency of certain procedures. These reports are vital for the process or for the planning process. Access is a relational database, and it consists of a collection of tables. And each one of these tables contains specific information. So for example, the CMF Vets database contains 5 tables. So we can see 3 of them here. The first table is the owners table, and this table contains information about the pet's owners. The next table is the patients table, and this contains contact information for each of the pet's owners. There is also here an appointment table, and this contains information about the scheduling of the appointments. So if we look here, the patients table has the patient ID, the patient's name, what type of animal they are, what is their breed, and this owner ID says, how do we link that to who their owner is? So this is different tables, but this owner ID allows it to be linked somehow to the owner table to say, well, who is your owner? The last 2 tables in this database is the treatment cost table, and this one contains the information about the cost of each treatment. And then there is the veterinarians. So who are the veterinarians? So this is a list of all the veterinarians in a practice or in their practice. So if we look here, we can see that we have some rows. Each one of our rows are actually known as a record in Access. So rows are records. So this is one record, so we can see the first record down the bottom of the veterinarians. We've given the veterinarian William a code so that he's unique. And we have his first name, his last name, his office phone number, etc. We have all that information is a record. It's on a row, and it talks about all of the information about this veterinarian. If we look at a field is like first name, that's the field, first name, last name, that's another field. If we look up in the treatment cost, the treatment is a field. So a field is going to be a column, okay? We also have what's known as unique identifiers. These in Access are known as primary keys. So we all have primary keys in our life. So if we have a library card, our library number is our primary key, right? That's our unique identifier at a library. Or our social insurance number is our unique identifier to the Government of Canada. So that is sort of the primary key that we know that is me when I go onto CRA. So that's the primary key, and everybody needs to have a primary key so we can see what's going on. And so that you're not going to go and neuter somebody else's dog, right? Which would go over very poorly. So that's part of these tables that we're going to be looking at. And our goal throughout this project is to create these tables and then start linking them together and see how we can take a mess of papers and appointments and put it together in a relational database so that we can access it from anywhere and we can update it quickly and easily. Okay, so we're going to get started with our first project in our introductory database, comma 115. We are going to go to Module 1, Databases and Database Objects and Intro. We're going to select 115, Module 1 Textbook Project. Remembering we have to download the actual file that they've given us in order to upload it to the program here. So we're going to go to Start. And in the Start, you'll see that there are 3 files here. You can choose to download them all. And I download all my files and put them into a folder so I don't always have to go online. The first one, of course, is going to be the walkthrough. The second one is the actual database that we're going to start with. And the third one is a support file, and we're going to be needing this table as we move along in order to load some information so we don't have to retype it all the time. So for now, because I have all this downloaded, I'm going to open up this new Microsoft Access database, and we will get started as soon as I've downloaded it. I do get this error that says this type of file can harm your computer. It says it doesn't like it, but I'm going to allow it to keep it. There's no problem with it. We know that it came from a safe site. So now that it's open, or now that it's downloaded, we can see that we have our database that looks like that. We're going to open it up. Mine opened up in the wrong side screen, so I'll move that over here so that you can see it. And we will be working on this database, and that's going to be our next session in our next slide, so we'll get started with that. Now that we have our first Access database open, we're going to talk a little bit about the window that we have going on here. The first thing we need to do right now is you'll notice that Sam has created an extra page right here, and in Excel we had sheets, whereas in these we have objects. In Access we have an object. So I'm just going to close this out. I don't really need to know anything about that. We'll leave it here. It's a grading information table. and we'll see how that grades. And then I'm going to enable my content. I can't get to work until I enable my content. Okay, so I've enabled my content. I'm going to close off my project information. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what Access looks like. So in many respects, it kind of looks like nothing's happening. We have a blank window here. We have different objects. And in our objects, we simply have a form for our project info that we're not sure what it's going to look like when it's done with. And in a normal Access database, when we open them up, this will all be blank, okay? And it might say table. So right up here, just like in Excel, we have our tabs, our different tabs. And in each tab, we have groups. So we have a clipboard group, a sort and filter group, and a records group. So as we go along, we'll explain the little bits that happen with each group, depending upon what type of object we create. Depends upon what type of tabs that we end up getting up here. So that's the beginning of our Access. When we create Access databases, we actually have to go through, normally open up Access and create the database, because a database itself is a holding. It's like a big folder. And within that folder, we have tables, we have forms, we have reports, etc. Okay, so it's just like one great big folder, and we're going to learn what objects we can put in there, what they look like, and what they do. So on a note, if you are not actually opening up a database from a previously created file, you would need to go into the Access program. So just open up Access and you will see a new blank database. So if you click on new blank database, we actually have to create this database and sort of create the folder for it, like the actual folder to house it. So right here in our blank database, we have a file name. So we have to create it before we can do anything. So I would choose my place. So I could choose my browse for the location that I'd like to put it. I could call it my testing database, whatever I want to call it. And then I would start and create the database. So once I create the database, it comes up empty like this. So this is normal. The one we opened up from Cengage had a few extra tables in there that you wouldn't normally see, but that's for their marking purposes. So in this one, we have a table. We have one field called ID, and it's allowing us to jump right in and create a table. So this is if we had to create a table from scratch versus creating a table that has already been created. So I'm back to my new Microsoft Access database with my name, and has all of the SAM stuff in it. Right now, I'm going to look at or discuss a little bit about databases and what happens when we want to create a database. So one of the things that's of utmost importance when we are moving from a paper-based to a database management system like Access is we really have to write down or create sort of a template of what tables and forms and reports do we actually want. So when we create a database, we first have to say, okay, so what is our table names? What are our table names going to be? So in this case, we're going to have a few tables, and we've looked at it and said, well, we know that we need a table for our for all of our owners. We need a table for our patients. We need a table for our appointments. We need a table for costs, etc. So we've mapped that out to figure out what the actual tables are going to be. Now, the one thing that you want to think about when we're creating tables is that tables must have a theme. So when we look at the college, for example, the theme of our tables might be students and their name and address and phone number. It might be staff and their name and address and phone number. It might be courses and who is in each course, or it might just be what is the name of all the courses that are available. It could also be a table with all the rooms and the availability of those rooms. So we want to stick with a theme for your tables. And that's what we've done here with this veterinarian, is we have a theme for everything. So each table is its own entity. And we've just figured out a way to link them. So names of fields, names of tables can be up to 64 characters in length. It doesn't matter, they can contain upper and lower cases, spaces, punctuation. There's a few things they can't contain, but each table must have a unique name, okay? Each table must also have a primary key attached to it. In other words, some kind of unique identifier. So we're going to start building our tables. And once we start building our tables, we'll see what type of unique identifier we're going to require with that. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to build the owner's table. So I'm going to close this window. I'm going to go to create, and I'm going to create a table. Okay. Now this, if you remembered in the past slide, this is what normally it would open up as if it wasn't coming from the Cengage. So what we're looking at here is there's different ways of designing or creating a table. And in this case, we're doing it in a data sheet view, not in any other design view. So this is data sheet view. And the way we can tell that is, well, because it looks like this, but also in our view up here, we have a down arrow there. We have a data sheet view and we have a design view. So we're going to create our first table in data sheet view. And then we're going to create our next few tables or look at our tables in design view. Now, design view is the most efficient way of doing it. And it's also the way that you'll do almost all the other tables starting now. But for this first one, we're just going to show you how you can create a table in data sheet view. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to right mouse button click on this ID. We're going to right mouse button click and we're going to rename. Okay. If you cannot right mouse button click, it's certainly okay to just double click. Okay, so double click the field and we're going to rename that field and we're going to call it owner ID. Now you can have spaces in your field names. There's no problem with that. And if you'll notice up here in our fields, once we're in our fields, we have different items or tabs available to us. We have the fields and we have the table. Okay, so this is talking about the table properties and that kind of stuff. But right now we're going to look at our field. So over here is what type of field it's going to, or we can create. And here is name and caption. So if I clicked on that, it says, because I didn't click as push enter, it says this is the name of it, this is the caption that it's going to be, and this is our description. So I could rename it there as well. And at this point, if you look at it, it's owner ID. It has already done an auto type. Sorry, I'll put it up there, and it's got auto number. So I selected it and it has an auto number. So we're going to change that from auto number, and that's the data type it is. So that just means what is allowed to be typed into that field. So I'm going to change that to a short text. So when we look at short text, it's the one we use most often. We can have up to 64 characters in length, and usually that's enough for whatever we want to put into it. Long text, of course, you can write a lot more information. Number, a large number, date or time extended, currency, yes, no, and hyperlink. So we're going to be dealing with some of these, but for now, most of them are going to be short text. Now also it says, is this going to be required? Is it unique? Well, yes, it is going to be a unique value because this is going to be our primary key. Is it required? It will be eventually. We could choose to whether we want it to be required. We may do that when we require a phone number or a name in it. We also have field size right here in our field size area. We can change our field size to be a certain size instead of 255 characters. We can change that field size to be, backspace that out and make it 5. Okay, so our field size means they can only put in 5 characters. Then we'll go to the name and caption. And in that we have our owner ID. The caption is really what's going to be presented when we look at tables and forms and reports. That's what would be the caption would be. So we're going to enter the properties in here. So in our caption, we're going to put O_ID, so owner ID. And in our description, we're going to type in a unique identifier of pet owner. So I'll tab that over. Unique identifier of pet owner. Okay, once I do that, there's a couple things that are of interest. Okay, so now you'll notice that I wrote in OID. Okay, so this field is still actually called owner ID, but the caption that we see is OID. And down the bottom here, you will see unique identifier of pet owner. So the description that I put came up down here. And that is a really handy thing for when we're typing in information and maybe we get to a field where we don't know what to type in. And this is the description of that. So we can write as much or whatever we want in there in the description, and it allows us to actually know what exactly we're supposed to put in there. Okay, so we've now created our first field. So if we want to create the next field, we say just click to add. And as soon as I click, I didn't right mouse click or anything like that. I click to add. So we want to create a short text. Okay, and it's already highlighted, so we can just type right away. So owner first name. So that's owner first name. And we'll click the blank space somewhere. We'll just click off of it. And now we can change the properties. So we had to click off of it to change the properties. Okay, so what we're going to do is we want it to be, I just have to take a peek. Owner's first name is short text. The field size is going to be 50. Okay, so we're going to make it 50. And we don't need to change anything else. And so we've created 2 fields now. Okay, so now we're going to finish off and create the rest of our fields. I'm getting this information from page 1-10. And all I'm doing is creating the structure for the owner's table. Okay, so I want short text is my next one. And on this one, oops, I could have kept it. I'm going to have the owner last name. And that one needs to be, this one needs to be 50 as well. Add another one, short text, and this is going to be the owner street. And I'm going to make that 255 characters. I'll click to add another one, short text. It's the owner city. And that's going to be 50. Oops, it didn't stick. I forgot to push enter afterwards. Short text. Next one is owner state. And this one needed to be 50 as well. Is that right? Nope, 2. owner postal code. And for that one, we want it to be 9, a field size of 9. And then we want to have a short text for a phone number. So we're going to do home phone. With a field size of 25. A mobile phone. So we're just creating the fields. Okay, and the mobile phone will have a field size of 25. And then an email address is our final one. Short text, email address. And that one looks like it's going to be pretty big. And we'll put it at 50. Okay, so we have created our first table. Our first table has owner ID, owner first name, owner last name, the owner street, city, state, postal code, home phone, mobile phone, and email address. We have no data in there, we just created the table. One thing I would like to show you is the design view, but first I have to change the name of the actual field itself, or sorry, of the table itself. So I'm going to save this table as owners. The owner, not owners, owner table. Okay, so I saved it, and I could have used save up here. We have our save as well. And then the one thing I'd like you to see is what it looks like, okay, in design view. So in design view, we have all of our fields, the names, the data type they are, any description that we gave them, and then anything else that we did to it. So for example, in the owner ID, we had it as short text, a unique identifier of the pet owner, a field size down here of 5, and the caption of O_ID. Okay, so now that we have that, we can do it all here instead of doing it in that other view. But we also see that there is this primary key. There is a key there. It's hard to tell, right? Right here, but it's the primary key. So we'll notice that this button, this primary key button, is pushed. So that means that the owner ID is the primary key of this table. Okay, so we created our first table. I'm going to close that. Okay, I'll just close that. Now in our tables, we have our owner table. I can look at it. I can double click. It will pop up back in Datasheet view. Okay, so this is now our first table that we created in Datasheet view. Now that we've created our table, we're going to add records to the table. So I'm going to open up my owner table so I can click on it or double click it, or I can right mouse button click and open it. Doesn't really matter which way I do it. So I will double click, open up my owner's table. So I'm going to open up create two records. Okay, so I'm going to create a record on page 1-17 for 01. So actually it's O-1. And I can just push tab as I go. So I'm just going to be typing in these records. So I just started at the beginning. Owner's first name is Ted. Last name is Sabas. So this is entering a record into a table that is set as a table versus we could enter into as a form, but we're just entering it directly into this table. So the owner's street is 460 West Pioneer Road. Their city is Dolores, and it's in Colorado. The postal code is 81323. And the home phone number is 719-231-4411. Okay, now because it's not set so that there's a set way to put this in, it's just in as short text, we're putting the dashes in for the home phone number. The next one is 719-888-7735. Normally we would do something a little bit different and not put those in there, but the dashes, but for now, because we're just starting, we're just going to put those in there. Email address is tsabus@cengage.com. And then I can just tab and it drops me down to the next one. So what might happen though is if you ever did this and you went and you tabbed forward and you now you'll notice that it doesn't say new here. It's sort of got, and then I start and I put Stephen's name in there, for example. And then I click off of it. Maybe I go back up there. I just click somewhere else and then you get this error that comes up. It says you must enter a value in the owner ID field. And it doesn't matter where I click. If I click anywhere else, it'll keep doing this, okay? The only time it's going to stop doing that is if you do what it says. Access is very specific that you do what it says. So what happens now is I forgot to put a value in owner ID. And because owner ID is a primary key and a unique identifier, I must do so. Okay, I must put it in there. So I can't keep putting I can keep putting stuff in here if I wanted to, but I'm not allowed to get off of this record until I actually put an owner ID in there. Okay, so this is O-2, and their first name is Stephen, last name is Mugen. And it's 9874 South Main Street in Blanding, Utah 84511. And then it's 435-991-5670. So I'm just entering the information that's in here for 2 records. Now this of course is called data entry, and data entry is can be very long and tedious. So we're not putting all of them in here right now. We'll be importing the data, but usually when we end up just creating a new database from a paper database, it takes a lot of time because we have to then transpose all the data from paper to digital. Okay, so we've created that. We've got 2 records. Unless I make changes to the data structure here, when I close it, it doesn't ask me to save. Okay, it didn't ask me to save the table. So my data stays in there. So if you end up deleting something, you can't do an undo with data entry here. Okay, there's no such thing. So be careful. But if I tried to make these, like if I just double click to make these cells a little bit bigger so I could see all the names of this, then what it's going to do is it's going to say, maybe I'll just close it and show you what happens. It says you must save the changes. Okay, do you want to save those changes? And I'll say, yes, I do. And then when I go back in, it still has the save changes of sort of what the layout is. Okay, so and then I'll just close that. And in our save up here, you'll notice there is no save of the database itself. We only save the objects within the database. Okay, So I could close the database at any time. I can close the database. It doesn't ask me to save. When I go back in to find access again, I'll go in and I'll have to type it in. So I'll open up my app, and the database that I was working on last is right here and available for me. Okay, so then I can just click on it once and it will open it up, and I can look at my owner table, and all of the things that I did in my owner table are ready to go again. So now our goal is to create another table. We're going to be creating the patient table. So we'll go up to create, and we're going to create a table. And it starts off that we have nothing really going on. It just starts with ID. But we're going to create this one in design view. Okay, so as soon as I click on the design view, it says I must save it. So I'm going to save this as patient. I think it's patients. I'll say okay. So now we've got the design view up. Our property sheet is over here, but we're going to be a long way from having to deal with our property sheet. But right here, we're just going to create a quick table. We're not going to worry about field sizes. We'll fix those later. We'll start off, and we're going to, the first one we will call patient ID. ID, and that's going to be a short text. So I can just type the letter S, and short text comes on, and then I can just tab. Okay, I can tab twice, and the next one is going to be the patient name. I'll tab. I wanted short text. It came up automatically. The next one is going to be animal type. Short text, tab, tab. Oops, I spelled animal type wrong. I can fix that. Breed, type, tab, tab. And owner ID. Now what this is going to allow us to do is to link the animal to the owner. Okay, so in our this table, the patient ID is the primary key. But this owner ID is actually called a secondary key because it's a primary key in a different table. Okay, so I'm just going to fix my animal type. We've created generally a table. We didn't worry too much about the field size. We left it at 255. And I can simply change views. I can go to view. I can change views so that it goes back to data sheet view. I could have X'd out of it, or I could have clicked save up there, but it says you must first save the table, and I say yes, I'll save that table. And then it comes back to what are my patients, and I just like to double click so that I can see the amount of information in the field name, and now I can enter the information. So on page 1-25 is the data that I'm going to enter into my patient table. So I know I have a C1 is the first person. This is Paws is his name, P-A-W-S. He's a feline, and he's a calico. And the owner is O-2. Okay, whoops, I did it wrong. O-2. Okay, so this is owner 2 is the one that owns that. Sorry, I went too fast. Go back. The next patient is C-2, and their name is Ranger, a canine, a Labrador, and their owner is O-1. Okay. And then I guess we have an F1, and that's Fluffy, who's a feline, Tabby, and owner 1 owns it too. So we've entered the information. We've got 2 cats and a dog, and we only had 2 owners, so we don't want to put an owner in here that we don't have yet. So we've entered and created a table for just the patients. So what is their name? What kind of animal are they? And who owns them? So then we've created our second table, and now that it's all ready to go, we can then just close it. And because they wanted me to change it because I made my cells a little bit bigger, not because I entered the data, and I can say yes, I can close my owner's table and my SAM thing, and then I'm ready to continue on to the next part. Our next step is going to be to import data from a separate database into this database. So on Cengage, we had to download a file called CMF Vets, and that had some extra information that we need to import into our database. So what we're going to do is import our data. So the first thing we're going to do, we can leave everything closed. It doesn't matter. I have I'm actually selected on the patient table, but it doesn't really matter. I could change that later if I wanted to. I'm going to go to external data, and I'm going to import, not export. I'm going to import, and I could do a down arrow. I can have from a file, which could be Excel or a text file, from a database, which would be Access, SQL, Azure, or DBase, from an online service, or from an other source. So we're actually going to choose from database, and we're going to choose our Access database. So we're going to import from Access. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I have to browse for the file that my information comes from. So I'm going to browse for my file. I know where I put it. I put it all in that one folder, and I put it in the folder for Module 1, and it is the Support AC CMF Extra Vets Extra Tables. So I'll just double check that it wasn't anything different. No, I don't have anything extra. So it's Module 1. I'll just double check. No, we're all good to go. It's the Support AC. Okay. So now we have our extra tables. It's in my file name. It's as an Access database. And I say, okay. And then it says, do you want to import tables, queries, reports, forms, and modules into the current database or link to it? Well, I really want to import the tables. I don't want to link to it. I just want to import those tables. All right, so I'll say okay. And then it comes up and it says, in that database that you requested to open, there are 3 tables: appointments, treatment costs, and veterinarians. Ooh, handy, we don't have to create those. Okay, so we're going to select all of them, the appointments, the treatment costs, and the veterinarians. And we're going to say, okay, so we selected them all, and we'll say okay to that. So we're entering those. Now this is a place where you can just save your import steps. Maybe if you're doing something a little more convoluted as you're going through, you might decide, well, I really don't want to have to go through that again. So you might save your import steps, but we really don't need to save our import steps because we can redo that quite quickly. There wasn't anything fancy that we did. So we're just going to say close. And then you'll notice that it imported those tables right here. So it imported those tables. We can take a look at it. The appointments table was imported. It already has the information. The owner table was the one we created. The patient table was the one we created. Our treatment costs, which is nice, we didn't have to type that information in. It was created. And then our veterinarian, those were created for us as well. Okay, so we have all of our tables up here and they're in as tabs. And what that did was it saved us a lot of time, so we didn't have to create any of those tables. It was just created for us. And I can close each one individually. And then I now have 5 tables already created in my database. We're now going to start creating a few other objects besides tables. The first one we're going to create is a query. And a query is really just a question that we want answers to in the database. So we're just going to query the database. So we create queries and we can run queries whenever we want to run queries, and we can actually build reports from those queries. So the first thing we're going to do is a simple query using the query wizard. So the owner wants, the actual vet wants to know what is the list of owners to send out a mailing thing to. So they want to display the owner's first name, last name, street address, city, state, and postal code. So there's some parts of the table, the owner's table, that they don't want. So if we look at our owner's table, we don't want the owner ID. We want their first name, last name, street, city, state, and postal code, but we don't really want their email address or their phone number. So those are the pieces we do want. So I have my owner's table selected. I can actually go up to create, and I can just go into, so we have our tables, our queries right here, our forms, our reports, and macros. So we're going to go into our query wizard. So I'll just click on query wizard, and we want to do a simple query wizard. Okay, nice and simple. We'll say okay. And because I had the owner table selected, it came up with owner table first. But if I hadn't selected the owner table, I could have chosen it from the drop-down list. So I want the owner's table, and I want it to display the owner's first name. I'm just going to push that button over. Owner's last name, the street address, the city, the state, and the postal code. Okay, so if I put something in there that I didn't want, like if I made a mistake, I could just back it out. Okay, but if I put them in the wrong order, it's easier just to remove them all and then put them back in again. Okay, so we have this. So if I wanted all the fields, I could just use that one arrow, and then I could go through and say I had lots of fields and I only wanted or didn't want a few of them, I could just pop them out. Okay, so we have first name, last name, street, city, state, postal code, and we don't want the phone number, the mobile phone, or the email address. So it looks like we got them all in there. Then we'll just say next. Okay, so once we've said next, it says, what do you want to name this query? And you're like, I can name it anything I want. Well, owner query is the default, so it was the owner table and it was a query. So we can call it owner's query. It says open the query to view the information or modify the query. For us, we're okay with just opening the query to view it. Okay, so we open it up and you'll notice that it now has a query, and it went down into another access group or object called owner query, and it's owner first name, last name, street, city, state, and postal code. Okay, so that query is now created for us. So we can use this query or open it up at any time, and it will always display the data that we have for the owners. Another type of object that we can create, I'll just close those two up, are forms. So there are lots of different types of forms. The first one we're going to do is just a simple form. As we move along in chapters, we'll go on to more in-depth forms. But for now, if I select my owner table, and then I just simply select in this area under Create Form, it does an instant form. So if I click it, whatever table I have selected, it creates this form. Now this form here is pretty general. It has everything is the same size, so all of my field names are the same, and I have my fields are pretty huge over here, aren't they? And it's in the sort of layout view. So I couldn't change or add any records using this form. But down here on the very bottom on the right hand side, there's a couple of buttons we can push. So there is form view, and you'll notice there is dashed lines. As soon as you see the dashed lines, you know that you're in layout view. So I'm going to select form view, and now I could actually scroll through using my records down at the bottom to view the different records I have of my owners. So I know I only put 2 owners in there, so I can see that my 2 owners. In layout view, once I click layout view, I can then make changes to the layout just like this. So say I could say, oh, that looks better if I did that. So that's changes to the layout. And then in design view, it's a little bit more interesting. We'll take a quick look at it. Okay, but these are all changeable items. For now, we're not going to be changing them, but this is what design view looks like. So if I went back to layout view and form view. So form view, I can enter information into it and scroll through them. Layout view is where I would change the layout generally. And then design view is when I wanted to go more in depth and do some more interesting things to it. So I can go back up to my save here and I can save that form. And that form says, what do we want to name it as? I think owners is just perfectly fine. I want to save it as owners form, I guess. Owners form. I was just looking at the book. Owners and owners form. I've got to watch that because they're probably going to ding me for that. Owners form. And I'll say okay. And I've created that. And then I have it saved. So it's already saved. I can save it again if I wanted to. And then I can close the form. The last object that we're going to create is going to be the report. So a report is really easily distributed. We put in the information we want, and it gets distributed really in a report form, a little bit more formal than a table or a query. So we're going to go into, make sure our owner table is selected. We're going to go into create, and this time we're going to do into report, and we're going to use the report wizard. Okay, so the report wizard says, which table or query would you like to use? Okay, so it allows us to use queries as well, but we're going to use the owner table, and we're going to then say, well, what do we want in our fields? Well, once again, I want my owner's first name, last name. I want the street, the city, the state. So I don't need the postal code at all, so I'm leaving that out. I don't need the phone number or their email address. Okay, so those are the fields that I want in my report. I'm going to say next, and then it says, do you want to add any groupings? Groupings mean that they would be grouped by whatever I ask them to. In this case, there's no sense in grouping anything by somebody's first name or last name. That does nothing for us. We might want to group by city, or we might want to group by state to see where you are in the world. So in this case, we're going to group it by owner state. And once I do that, I select that and I use the arrow. Okay. And you'll notice that now it's got owner state. This means that all of them are going to be grouped by what state they're in. And don't forget, in ours, it's not going to look that fabulous because we only have 2 owners. But that's just, for now, that's sort of what we're going to do. Okay, so we've grouped it by owner state. We'll say next. And it says, do you want to sort? Well, no, we won't sort right now, but we'll get into sorting in a little while. So no. And what do you want it to look like? Well, we want it to leave it as the layout of stepped. And we want to leave it in portrait orientation. And then we'll say next. And it says, what do you want to name your report? And we want to name it, owner's report. So owner's report is what we're naming it. And then we want to preview it. So we'll finish that. And now we can see as a general report, there's lots of things that we can change about that. Maybe we want to look at this and we want something to be bold, or we want to change the colors, or we want to change the sizing of where things fall, etc. There's so many things we can do. But for now, we're not going to change the layout all that much. But now for anybody that lives in Colorado, it's stepped down and we'll have all of the information of all those people who live in Colorado, and then Utah is the next group. So that's our grouping. So we created a general report, and we're going to get into reports in the next few chapters. But for now, this is just a simple query or simple report wizard report that gives us some general information in a default kind of format. Okay, so now that we've created our final object that we're going to create, we're just going to look at a few other things, and then we're going to shut this down. So I'm going to close this report. I'm going to go up to the file into the Backstage view and take a look at the info. And then in our info, we have some information. We can copy our file path, which is really quite handy when we're not sure really where this is saved, but we want to share it with somebody else. We can copy that. We can open our file location so we can see where it is. We are going to look at compacting and repairing a database and encrypting with a password. And we can also view and edit our database properties. So when I click on that, this is where I could put all the information that I wanted to about this. We could change this to say that it was edited or who it was, what the title was, anything interesting that we needed to put in there. And these are just some of the database properties, so we can tell who put that in there. So for example, maybe I want to change it to my name _ Fisher. So I've changed it so that I said that I'm the one that created this database. So this allows us to see what was created. So I can say okay to that. The other one that we're looking at is to compact and repair a database. So when we do that, when we add and subtract a bunch of pieces in our database, so maybe we made a bunch of forms and we made a bunch of reports or queries and then we deleted them, they actually get housed and they stay there. So when we compact and repair a database, what it's doing is it's actually just shrinking it down in size. This one went so fast we didn't even see it happen, but the fact of the matter is there wasn't really much in there. Okay, so compact and repair our database, and it does something we're like, wow, what did you just do? It just obviously does that instantly. Okay, so that's one of the things that we would do when we've been working a lot with our database. It just saves it or shrinks it down in size. So if we go back here, we can also want to back it up, and we can do save as. And then once we do a save as, we can save our database as a template, a 2000 database. We can package it up, we can back it up, any one of these things that we would do. So this allows us to take a backup, put it somewhere else, because databases are a lot of work to create and there are a lot of information in there. So you always want to have more than one database around there. So maybe I want to back up my database. Okay, so I'll click Backup Database and Save As. And then it will have a database and it gives me my the date that I'm doing that on. So I can put it into my folder that I have all of my documents in there. And if I go into my _115 folder in Module 1 in the textbook project, I can say New Access Database. And when the date is put in, that's where I know that it was backed up on this date. So then I would save that, and that is just the database backup. So that's the final thing. We compact, we repaired, etc. We've got it all ready to go, I think. Our next step is going to be to upload it to Cengage. Okay, so now that I am going to be uploading my assignment to Cengage, I need to just double check and see what I need to name the file as. So I'm going to go to my Mind tab, and it says it wants me to call it CMF_vets_Kathy Fisher. Okay. Okay, so I will upload or make sure my file name is called that. So I can go to File and Save As, and I can save my database as a different name. So I'll do save as, and I'm going to change it so that it's called CMF underscore vets underscore my name. Okay, and it's in module 1 in my textbook project, and I'll just click save. Okay, so we'll notice it's CMF vets, database, excellent, textbook project. Good. So now I'll go back to my sheet here, and it wants me to drag and drop my file. So I'll drag and drop my file. So if I drag and drop my file, oops, I'm going to go up one, and we'll see what it does to us. Textbook project, and I have 2 of them going, but now I have the latest one. That's this one. Oh, I should close it. So that's one thing I wanted to show you too, is you'll notice here that I have 2 of them going. One of them is 1 kilobyte. What that means, and it's got what's locked on, it's got a lock on there. So that means it's open, okay? So as soon as I go to my database here and I close it, I'll just X out and it'll close it. Then it goes away, okay? So now I only have the 1 in there, which is way better. I didn't want 2 of them. So we'll just upload this one right to where it says to copy to. And we'll see if it's the right way. And then we will submit for marking. So now I'm going to look at my graded summary report, and we'll see what we need to do with that, and we'll fix anything we did. I didn't do any spell checks, so that could be a problem. Pretty sure there's probably a problem there. So I would just open that up and enable the content, and then I'm going to go into my grading info table, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, I'm not sure what it did. It just showed that it was a user ID. There's our report down here that has our grader report. And it looks something like our Excel. Okay, and these are all the things. You'll notice that I got a lot wrong. And one of the reasons why I got a lot wrong is because I wasn't really super specific. So you notice the database should contain a table named owners. I called it owner. As soon as it looks at that, it goes, oh, I can't even go look there because you must not have created the table. So I know that just creating or just changing the owner table, I'm going to fix all of these marks that I got wrong. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm going to do. And then this one says that patient ID should be resides to best fit. And then if I look at my patients, and I go to my patient ID, okay, I just double click it so that it's the best fit. I'll go back to my grading report. It says to use the simple query wizard to create a query. Now the reason that this did that is probably because my owner table was created wrong. Okay, so there's a few things I'm going to go through, but I'm just going to go through and change my owner table to owners table. And as soon as I do that, everything should be hunky-dory. So that's my next step. I'll upload it and then fix that. So I would open up not the one, the report that they gave me, but I would open up the actual one that I was working on. Okay, so I'm going to enable content. So there's no other report here. This is the one that I just created. I'm going to right mouse button click on my owners table. I'm going to click that and I'm going to say owners. Okay, so that should fix a lot of those problems I had. I'll go into my patient table and I will resize that. So I'll just make sure everything is best fit because I probably didn't finish doing it. And owner ID is fine. That's good. And I can't remember what else it said. I think there's something in a query, but maybe I will see if they care whether that's the way it is. So then we're just going to go back and forth just like we did before, just to make sure that everything is exactly the way we want it to be. I'll close those up, save everything that I changed, yes. And then I will re-upload it again, and we'll see if we did a little bit better then, and then just fix the things that need to be fixed. Okay, so I changed that so that the owner's table is actually called owner's table. Okay, so I have submitted it again because I just changed the owner's table really, and then did a little bit of fixing there. But now it says that they've non-graded a few things. But there's a few things that I still have wrong because I only got 67%, but most of these are really simple fixes. So it says the owner's table, the description property for owner ID field should be set to unique identifier of pet owner. So just watch your capitalization, etc., etc. So I'm just going to open up my database one more time. And then I'm just going to fix these small things because I think it's just a spelling errors. So I'm going to go to my owner's table. I'm going to go into design view. And I'm just going to double check. Oh yeah, see I spelled owner wrong. I find it's far away from me. So unique identifier of pet owner. Okay, that one's good. I fixed that piece right there. I'll double check and see what else they said is wrong. So I fixed that one. The owner table should contain records shown in figure 1-17 of the module. So basically that's probably a spelling error as well. I'll fix that. And then the database should contain a query named owner's query. So if you look here in my query, I called it owner query instead of owner's query. So I would go back and fix that as well. So those are my final fixes. Hopefully I end up getting 100%. I will go back to my data sheet view to look at it to say Sabbath. So these are like things that I'm going to have to go through and check my spelling on, which happens to me quite a bit, that I spell things incorrectly and I have to be more careful about that. But I will change my owner's query. I'll rename that and I'll just change it to owner's query so it won't give me a problem with that. Okay, so final check, send it in, should work just great. But be sure to ask questions if you end up with some issues, and we'll work through it and make sure we've got it correctly. Okay, so that's it for project 1. Got this project to do, or the textbook project, and then a few projects to get done. And don't forget to ask questions if you get stuck.